So I'm in London, and I've been spending a lot of time here, more specifically here, looking at these. And I've been having a great time doing it. And I wanted to do a bit of a video about it because a lot of my lack of content the past year has in part been because coming to the National Archives in England has been kind of part of my plan for a little bit. And there's a lot of stuff here that I've wanted to look at before I've made more videos because they answer a lot of questions and I don't have to worry about as much about sticking my foot in my mouth. So I found a lot, and I've been about here. I've been at the archives for about 5 days, and it's the weekend for them. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week should wrap it up before I'm out of London. But yeah, I just want to share some of the stuff I found because I found a lot of really cool stuff, and a lot of this is definitely going to get turned into videos. Anyways, enough of the upbeat music. So I'm just gonna kind of show you what I have in the photos, the photo albums here, and just kind of do this off the cuff. So day one was a lot of stuff where I was trying to find Air Force stuff because I think there was a lot of cooperation with the Royal Air Force, which doesn't get talked about. So I was hoping these files would prove some of my points. Unfortunately, didn't quite turn into what I was looking for, but there's still pretty interesting stuff. Anglo-American Committee for Coordination. There's a couple of different names, but there were a number of meetings they set up in early 1943 to coordinate things. Um, but and then some operational research reports, which I was also looking for because I want to fill out my website. But I think the most interesting things I found was mosquito production because I've seen a lot of people talk about how the mosquito bomber could have been used to replace the Lancaster because it had such a low loss rate and everything. And, when you look at actually this stuff, I wonder if I can't find one in particular here, it's actually surprising how low the production of the Mosquito was. Some of these documents are talking about the unarmed bomber, 10 a month in 1943. And actually, when you look at these documents, it's really clear that the Mosquito is being prioritized for night fighters and fighter bombers, whereas the light bomber is actually not being produced too heavily. This one has 40 on it, but I believe this is in 1944, this document, when there's a lot of pressure. Yeah, there it is, February 44. And I mean, how are you going to replace a fleet of four-engine bombers with two-engine bombers when you're making 40 a month, right? So this was a bit more for my curiosity, but I thought it was pretty interesting. That's not to say that I've won the argument, but I think it's interesting. Day two was actually mostly about decoys and pyrotechnics, because if you've watched my RER videos, you'll know that I talk about the fake target indicators, and I know of them, but it's very hard to find any information out there. But there is an entire folder. Actually, there's a couple different folders, but a lot of it's repeat, looking at it. And lo and behold, I have what the rockets that are firing from the ground look like. And this is from investigation. False sky markers, the launcher tubes, how they were set up, the concrete platforms. Really cool stuff, which, you know, and then here's a drawing of what it looked like. So this is definitely a video in and of itself, for sure. So that's probably the neatest thing. But also there's the fire sites as well. The Germans would make fake fire sites so that it would look like a city burning or areas on fire. And this is how they would try to draw some of the bombing away. So I've talked about it, but this is the first time I've ever seen photos of it. So I know what these look like now. So that was probably the coolest part on the second day. and then some stuff on the German GCI system. Day three, I took about 3,000 photos. I'm serious. Most of it was these interception tactic reports, which probably wasn't worth that much effort, but they're essentially I have the entire war's worth of nighttime interception reports. A lot of it's already covered in the operational research reports I have, but what's really kind of useful for me is that they actually give the routing for all the bombers, which I don't actually have in a lot of the documents. And what's actually really interesting about these early ones is that when the Royal Air Force was not using the bomber stream tactic, when the bombers were just planning their own routes, actually it has all those recorded. So if I ever wanted to do pre-1942 raids, let's see if I can't find one. I'd actually have the route. Yeah, you can see here it's like the routes given. One group, 7 aircraft this direction, 25 aircraft took this way, 19 took this way. Which is kind of interesting because I've always been under the assumption that the bomber crews planned their own, but these reports kind of suggest that their aircraft were following similar, or some of them were following similar paths. Like 20 followed this way, whereas one went this route and one went this route. So that's really interesting. Um, but this kind of future proofs me, which is nice because not all the operational research reports, the raid reports I had, gave me the routes, and that makes animating those videos very difficult. Day four was actually a bunch of things, but it was all about armament for British bombers. And I think this is the neatest one. Looking at the 50 caliber guns put on the bottom of British bombers to protect them from German night fighters. And, if you know anything about British bombers, you know they're very vulnerable to attacks from underneath, and it's kind of what was the policy and why did things work out the way they did. Uh, as it turned out, there was actually quite a fair number of bombers that got the guns put on them. I think a lot more than I expected. Where's the one I'm looking for? This is the correspondence section. Um, yeah, about in June 44, I believe, 68 Lancasters and 92 Halifaxes, but they also have 331 ready to be fit and 80 on the Lancasters. And actually, when you're reading this report, there was a huge plan to, like, there was a real effort to put guns on the bottom of the Lancasters and the Halifaxes. You'll have to wait for the video for the full detail, but it's a lot more, there's a lot of stuff out there in books and everything talking about the leadership being callous or not caring or being stupid or something, but actually there was a real effort to get the guns underneath, but there was complications and ultimately a choice between H2S and the guns, and they went with H2S, which actually makes a lot of sense when you understand the macro reasons for why H2S was so important when you combine that with British electronic warfare and how they were evading German night fighters. Um, but there was a lot of other things. They actually have a whole section on the Rose turret, an entire folder on the 50 cal rear turret on the Lancaster, and also the actual designs for the underguns. For example, this is what the Halifax 50 cal underneath looked like. Actually, this is a modified version because it originally didn't have the side panels. And this was the best of the bunch. The Lancaster was literally just a hole cut in the floor, which explains why the Lancaster crews were not quite as not quite as thrilled with this as a defensive weapon, but there's a lot more to it as well. Uh, So I essentially figured out why the under-armament policy worked the way it did. There's also interesting stuff as well in regards to the uh, blisters, the viewports they were putting underneath the bombers earlier, and there's this whole video that's like the cover, the fact that the bombers were trying to um, have like be able to see underneath them, but there was a lot of issues around that that prevented it from ever being that worthwhile. So uh, yeah, a whole bunch of things here. And then today was actually a lot to do with British reports on German radar, which is really good. So this stuff's really exciting because a lot of the German radar, it's hard to find information, and it's also kind of just confusing. So I got reports on basically a lot of the German radar, the characteristics. The British were looking at these things after the war. There's drawings of the different types. Uh, yeah, no, and then there's like they have translations of like the German manuals. Let's see if I can't find one. And they go down to like showing you the wiring diagrams. Like I could probably build some of these at this point with the amount of details in the report. So it's like it's really cool stuff going through here, and the amount of stuff that's in the archives. I mean, I don't think it's surprising that there's a lot that hasn't seen the light of day because it's not digitized, but it's really thrilling as someone who has kind of an interest in this. And certainly there's a lot of primary source Mondays, which I haven't done in a long time. Uh, reports, several page reports about these different things, um, about how the Allies kind of what they knew about it and what they didn't. And yeah, so there's a lot of like cool stuff and images I have now. And still a bunch more to look at next week. So it's been a pretty good visit, and I'm looking forward to getting some more content out when I'm back in Canada next month because I'm still in Europe for a bit, even when I'm not in London. I'm on a tour that's taking me essentially a giant circle around Switzerland without actually going into Switzerland. So it's going to be a pretty good time. But I'll do another video after I'm done the 3 days next week, just kind of showing the remaining stuff I found because hopeful that there's a bunch of other things that I'm looking for that I'm going to find. Unfortunately, the British National Archives is a little, the descriptions on the website are not the greatest thing, so you don't always know what you're going to get. But it's been a pretty good experience so far. So with that, I'm going to end this impromptu video and wishing you guys all the best.